Well, welcome, folks. I'm sitting here today with Dr. Kevin King. Kevin is with USDA, and why don't you tell us a little bit about your position, what you do here at USDA?
Sure. So I'm with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Agricultural Research Service. We are located, we're the Soil Drainage Research Unit, and we've been established here back in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And so our mission when we first came on board was to really try to help and how do we drain the land? How do we make it more farmable in this landscape? More recently though, let's say probably the last 20 years, our focus has switched from not just putting pipe in the ground, but how do we manage that water and how do we manage it from a crop production standpoint, but also a water quality standpoint.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. So you mentioned Agricultural Research Service, ARS for short.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that branch and what it does within USDA?
So the Ag Research Service is the research arm for the Department of Agriculture. So you maybe have heard of agencies such as the Natural Resource Conservation Service. The Forest Service is part of the USDA. We are another branch of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which our primary research mission is the research part, and we serve as that research arm.
Okay. And we're sitting in your office today at the in Columbus campus in Food, Ag, and Biological Engineering, and
right.
You all have space here that you partner with the university with.
That's right. So when we started, many of the ARS, I think right now there's greater than 90 facilities across the U.S. Half or more of those are located at land grants institutions, and that was the design because there was a need to try and work with the universities and in that land grant system, and so it was a partnership, and so we're co-located, we're integrated into the department. I serve on graduate committees, we share a lot of data with different faculty for different aspects, so we're part of the university without being part of the university. So.
Great. Okay. So this is like an emerging theme that, what's part of what makes my job so fun is that you've got a lot of different entities working together, and the kind of the collaborative nature of that, and it's what makes working on these complex environmental puzzles. I mean, some people don't like that, but probably guys like you and me, we might gravitate towards some of that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Okay, so I asked you to meet with me today so you could just explain to the class a little bit more about the edge of field work that you do. It's a big effort, of course, that you've started in since you've moved into kind of leading this drainage research unit, this branch. So tell us, just in a kind of a general sense, we've been out and Greg Labarge showed us, one of the facilities and the samplers, but tell us a little bit more kind of an overview about the edge of field work that you do. There's different facets than just measuring P losses from field.
That's right. So let's go back to the beginning. So when I first came here, I came here in 2002, and the focus at that time was pesticides. There had been two reports written in the 1990s. One identifies pesticides by the glass, and the other one was called Tap Water Blues, and they were really focused on the herbicide atrazine in drinking water. And so at that time, when I was brought in, the focus was to set up edge of field, small watershed type sampling systems, primarily within the drinking water supply for the city of Columbus, and to measure that water quality signature, but then also identify practices that the farmers could implement that would reduce those signatures. Since that time, it's morphed into a little bit of a wider breadth of research and questions that we're trying to answer. And I think it was in 2000, the 2005 Farm Bill, there was a mandate by Congress to look at, or Congress said, okay, we're going to fund the Farm Bill, but we want to know what is the impact of these practices. Do they work? Is the taxpayer getting the bang for the buck? And so out of that was born this idea of CEAP, the Conservation Effects Assessment Project. And so that started us to look more just at pesticides, but it really brought in the nutrient questions and the actual farming practices. As I talked about earlier, we talk about ARS being the research branch. Well, NRCS is the one who facilitates and administers the Farm Bill programs. And so we were trying to understand, do those practices work or do they not? And how efficient are they? So that's where we came in with some of this, the SEEP project effort. Then in 2009-10 time frame, there was the Mississippi River Basin Initiative. A lot of focus on the Gulf hypoxia issues. So we started working on that as well. All of these being edge of field, small watershed types of research questions.
Okay.
And then in 2011, 10, 11, 12, the Lake Erie issue started to appear, and so we were trying to figure out how do we get involved with that. And so our research has, as I said, it started as a small City of Columbus drinking water issue, and has really now expanded into this larger statewide water quality assessment.
Yeah. And so I love that, we're kind of positioned conveniently to the map. And,
right.
And we've seen a little bit of this before, but these are presumably where you're actually doing some of that edge of field work. Right?
These are all the points where we started doing our edge of field work. And again, some of them, these are the active ones now. We had some others on the map that have since disappeared. They've been decommissioned for various reasons. But this is where we're currently active at this point.
Okay. So tell us, you've got a team of technicians, and we learned that when water's flowing, you guys are out there pulling samples from those ISCO samplers.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about your team. Probably you're stuck behind a computer answering emails and filing the annual
Unfortunately.
But you got a team that's housed here that they go out and they're traveling to these sites and pulling those. So just walk us through a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's absolutely every 2 weeks, but generally once a week. And if we get larger rainfalls, sometimes it can be twice a week that we do. And I say we loosely, as you alluded to. It's a team of technicians that go out, and a support staff. But we've got 4 individuals that will go to the field, and then we've got 2 that do the laboratory work. So they'll go visit these sites. When they go to a site, you've seen the automated type of samplers, so there's water samples inside those. They'll pick those samples up, they bring back to the lab, they start to process those samples. And processing meaning one of the big things is chain of custody. If you think about this type of a network where we're doing both surface and tile flow, and these are paired sites, so every one of those dots generally has 4 sampling points. And so we've got roughly 105 sampling points right now that we've got where we're collecting data. So when we think it's a huge amount of data. So there's a lot of logging in that first has to go on, where we have a unique ID that goes with each sample. So they can bring back to the lab. That's the initial start. Then they'll start to process those, and they will filter them, meaning we have to take the sediments off, because we're looking at both the dissolved fraction of the nutrients as well as the sediment attached. So we subsample those, then we'll digest them, meaning that we basically get everything off of those that we can, and then we're trying to analyze them. So then we'll run them through an analytical instrument that allows us to identify what is the concentrations of our nitrogen or our phosphorus and different constituents.
Okay, so you've got technicians that are dedicated, or maybe their primary responsibilities are to collect the samples. There's a lot of miles that you're all logging every.
It's about 1,400 miles a week that we're logging.
And then bringing that into a central facility where you're processing that in the lab, and then just the amount of data that you're generating and having to account for that is a big.
It's a huge undertaking. It was early on. We were when I first started, probably up until probably about 5-6 years ago. We were doing everything in Excel. So all of these different, every sampling point had a sheet in an Excel file, and it's just too burdensome. So we've since we worked with or did some investigating. There's a couple of different programs out there. We decided to go with a data management program that the USGS uses, and so that's how most of this data goes into that type of a system now. And we're in the process of putting telemetry telemetry on all of these sites as well. So we still will have to physically go and collect the samples and bring them back, but the data itself, in terms of telling us what the flow rate is or what the stage levels are, the flow rate, what's the velocity of the water going through the pipe, did it rain, did it not rain, that information, hopefully within the next 6 months, will be able to be downloaded from here in Columbus.
That's great. And for those of you that, or those of the students that don't know what telemetry is, what would you?
It's a remote communications, and that can either be by satellite or cell phone.
Okay,
so,
gotcha. Great. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you generate data. You've got sophisticated database to upload it to it, store it. What happens next? Like, where does your data go? How are those data used? Everybody, we can understand and appreciate at this point how much effort it takes, and how and effort equels money, right? So it's very expensive to generate the data that you do, but then hey, buddy, Kevin,
that's right.
You got some data for me? Tell us about the request. I mean, how do you navigate all that? Like, how many?
That's a great question, and it's normally done one-on-one. If there's someone interested in using the data in some form or capacity, I generally sit down just like we're sitting here. We talk about what their hypothesis is or how they would like to use it. And I'm generally open to that. My biggest, and the only reason I do that is I want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. As long as the efforts are complementary, I'm fairly open with the data. And we share a lot of data. I mean, this data is pretty much gone across the country at this point. So,
so can you just provide some examples of how people have used the type of data and everything? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, there's a couple of there's been a PhD student at North Carolina State that is using it. North Carolina State, the developers, for those of you not familiar, there's some simulation tools developed there specifically for tile drainage. And so we're a tile drain landscape. They're using it to develop or enhance a computer model there. It's been used at Purdue University. They've similar types of things. There's some different modeling, and that's probably a lot of the sharing of the data has been with models, but we've shared with others as well for different assessments, the 4R assessments, if you will. There's been some that sharing with different groups, Heidelberg University for one, so I'd say the modeling is one arena where it's been used for sharing. I'm sitting here thinking, trying to come up with some others. It's like I said, there's a lot of different groups. We have special side projects too that enhance. So we get for two-stage ditches, for example, it's it's an in-stream practice, but we've got two-stage ditches on 2 of our sites. So it makes sense that we can collect data off of those. So we've partnered with the Nature Conservancy for one to help understand what happens on those benches in terms of nutrient cycling. And so there's data that we've done some more analysis, but we've shared it with the Nature Conservancy at that point.
Yeah, just the comment that it's not this is data that is interest for a lot of different research questions. It's not just we've talked about the P-risk index, of course, data going into that.
Right. That's another example of a model that it can help to inform.
And that's really kind of maybe a more applied question of how does a management practice influence runoff or whatever.
Right.
But and from a long-term monitoring perspective, where there's a lot of different potential research questions that you can take a data set like that.
Absolutely, and I think that's what we're trying to do. I mean, we're going out here and collecting data, and we have specific research questions that we're trying to answer. What I hope is that 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now is that another researcher can say, boy, they collected the right data for a research question that hadn't even been posed yet, and that we can answer those. And I think that's what I hope to come out of this. Great.
Okay. So I'll ask this question just out of playing a little bit of a devil's advocate, but there's we all recognize, and we've talked as a class about this big effort or big interest in phosphorus and phosphorus loss. What would you say if I meet some maybe cantankerous scientists from somewhere else, and they say, if you want to know anything about P-loss, you just need to know what the erosion rates are. That's all tied to that. So just measure erosion. You don't have to go out and do all this fancy water quality stuff.
It's a great point and a great question. And the conventional wisdom and what we were all taught back in our soils classes was that phosphorus attaches to the soil and it moves with the soil. And I think that holds today. I really do. I think we have some unique characteristics here. We have a tile drain landscape. We tend to put a lot of our nutrients across the surface, and if it doesn't get attached to those sediments quickly, and we get a rainfall, we do get some movement. It can go into the preferential flow, and so and that's a dissolved fraction. And I think while we say that phosphorus generally moves with sediment, I totally agree with that. But there are some situations, and I think Lake Erie is a perfect example of that, where dissolved phosphorus is what's the problem. It's not the sediment-bound phosphorus. We solved the sediment-bound phosphorus or the particulate phosphorus, the total phosphorus question back in the 80s. Now we've got a dissolved issue. And so yes, I agree with the statement in general, but there's more going on than that, and that's what we're trying to understand right now.
Yeah, and it's coupled with all the work that you're trying to do, just so that maybe we get a better appreciation of and just the complexity of the systems we're dealing with, trying to model. A watershed at multi-county scale, right?
That's right.
It's a large. I
think it's 18, 19 counties there.
Yeah, a large area. And then you've got just trying to collect baseline data, look at management practices. But coupled with that, we can layer on the changing environment, right? We've got things like the last 10, 20 years, the density of tile drainage that's been installed in this area is huge, right? It is. We can talk about, in some of your work and looking at rainfall pH and differences in pH. We can talk about rainfall events, how precipitation is coming with changing weather patterns and just giant rainfall events that we're having. So it's not just like trying to understand the system, it's trying to understand the system as it continues to morph and change, right?
Absolutely. And as I always say, there's everybody wants to find the reason, they want a silver bullet to solve it. Well, we can't have a silver bullet if we don't have a smoking gun. We don't know what caused the problem, and it's this perfect storm, if you will, as you've described it. Part of that's the changes in climates. Part of that's the intensity of agriculture. It has to do with the way we larger farms, our windows of opportunity to apply nutrients or whatever are getting smaller. So those are types of things that all lead to this. Matter of fact, I was part of a manuscript that we identified 25 things that are potential for leading to this, and you're absolutely right. There's no silver bullet. There's not one of those. It's the combination of several of those, no doubt, that have led to this problem.
That's great. Okay. Anything else that you want to talk to us about or share with us in terms of Tell us about your job. What are the things that you enjoy most about the work that you do?
I enjoy.
We'll ask you about what makes you bang your head against the wall. Tell us about what are the things that you really enjoy.
What I really enjoy is I enjoy looking at data. I enjoy when I can look at the data and again go talk to a producer where we've collected data and say, hey, here's what the data is showing us, and whether that be, hey, you can do a little better here, or you're doing great. It's refreshing for me to be able to do that, to go and work with a producer and them say, I got it, I get it, I see what I'm doing, I can do better or whatever, and that's what's enjoyable to me. Unfortunately, I don't get to do that as much anymore, but those are the types of things I do enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. We with Greg LaBarge, we toured the Beck's facility. Of course, that's a private company.
Right.
But a lot of these are on private land.
They're
farms.
They're all on private land.
Okay, and so somebody's raising their hand and stepping up and saying, "Hey, come to my farm and do this." So they've got some vested interest. They probably want to know what's going on.
They do.
Those things are all.
And I think that's an important message that doesn't get shared enough. Is the agricultural community does the finger is pointed at them at quite frequently. They are trying and they want to be part of the solution. We volunteers all the time. I mean, I wished I could go and monitor or put instrumentations out on all of the ones that have asked. There's no possible way. They do want to be a part of the solution.
That's great. Yeah, so it's a complex puzzle and a lot of moving parts, but really appreciate you spending time sharing us with your thoughts. And
thank you.
Good luck with you. Good luck with all the work, and hopefully you can keep those stations going. And
we hope to. I mean, from a funding standpoint, there's a lot of people involved in this, and probably the heavy lifters throughout the whole project has probably been the department. The NRCS has funded a lot of this, but there are aspects of this project that have been funded by for partnerships with Ohio State, partnerships with Heidelberg University, partnerships with NGOs such as the non-government agencies such as the Nature Conservancy, Ohio Farm Bureau, the commodity groups, and I hesitate to start listing because I leave someone out, but it's a huge effort that at some point or other, many of these institutions and groups have provided some funding to support this. So.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Awesome. Perfect.
Thank you. What you need?
Yeah,
all right.
Got it.